Welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We're a bunch of mega fans giving you the news discussion and, of course, a whole lot of opinions about Brandon's works and the Cosmere. I'm Eric, and joining me is Ian.
Hey, I'm WeiryWriter. And before we get into today's topic, I just want to say that we're recording this on Mother's Day, which is highly amusing, if you know what we're going to be talking about.
We're going to be talking about some loved ones who died today. So, happy Mother's Day. Well, of course, you'll see this 2 weeks later, but, Also joining us is Grace.
Hello, I am the Gator Girl.
And we also have Shannon.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gray.
And lastly, we have Matt.
Hey, I'm Comatose on the forums and Discord, and I'm excited to talk about some dead loved ones today. Spouses and parents.
And I'm Chaos. So we had a few different titles. We weren't sure what to title this episode, but we called this Love and Lost in the Cosmere because dead spouses. We're also going to talk about dead parents too. So you found a TV trope name for what we're going to talk about, Matt. Can you explain?
Yeah, so if you're a TV tropes fan like me, you can find this one under the Lost Lenore, which is, of course, named for The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. And it's a dead love interest of a prominent character who dies at the beginning or before a story begins, but whose death has a significant impact or consequence and is usually a strong motivator for the protagonist. It's a popular trope for Brandon and in general. I think it's popular partially because it gives a character backstory. They had a relationship before. It's something they were doing before. And it also, but conveniently removes that backstory so the character is unattached and can, go through the story and doesn't have, a spouse or whatever holding them back. It also gives conflict or angst, which writers or readers sometimes like.
Gotta love the anguish. Making characters suffer. Another
characteristic is that the dead person is often idealized in their death. So they will often be seen with less flaws, or they are put on a pedestal. Because you can't mess up someone's idealization of you if you're dead.
Yeah.
Although we will probably talk about a couple of examples where that's not true, or where
we'll dive into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some real good ones here.
And it's interesting that this is so pervasive, but it's tropes become tropes because they work.
Yeah.
People, they make sense to people like them. So it's
I think it's
interesting.
I think it's
seeing
also
patterns
nice
emerge
for characters who are, if you want to give a sense that characters aren't they're 18 or they're in their early 20s, with Kelsier and Mare, as we're going to talk about. It's oh yeah, Kelsier is
had a life before.
Real adult.
Yeah. Another thing, we're going to be discussing tropes today, but a thing to keep in mind with tropes, like Ian was saying, is they're not inherently bad. They became tropes because they work, but they can be bad if they're done wrong, or you're relying on the trope to kind of carry you through. If you have good writing that happens to fall within a trope, you're fine. And I think that's often where Brandon falls. I think he does cool things with them, but if it becomes a crutch where you're oh, I don't want to think about a dead or a spouse, so I'm just going to kill them off, that can become lazy writing or not as enjoyable for readers.
Yeah.
And that's the main trope we'll be talking about. I think we're also going to talk about another one called fridging, which comes up a lot in discourse, but I'm not as familiar with. Shannon, do you want to give a definition?
It comes up pretty often in conversation whenever a woman dies, especially if she has a romantic connection to a main character. So just so everyone we're all on the same page before we dive into all of this. Fridging, which I think the main definition or the original definition is when the female character, wife, girlfriend, whatever, is killed off screen and is basically just there as to cause the dude pain give him some angst, give him some just make him suffer, and like that's kind of like the entire purpose of the death is just here's the purpose is all about the man suffering and not about the what actually happens to the woman.
Mhm.
So
to give him a revenge plot, for
to give
example,
him a
and things
revenge
like that.
plot, or to the shock to like make the readers go, oh my god, that kind of thing. Yeah, so
she's the plot device instead of a character.
Exactly.
I think is the
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like a female like romance connection, but that's kind of what it's developed into, is like meaning like whenever it's a female character, I feel like this trope always gets brought up. Not for, and I wouldn't say it's wrong to like for people to automatically go in this direction, but we'll talk about whether or not we think like these are Phrygian or not kind of examples. Even though Brandon does seem to do the dead wife thing, it's like, are these actually Phrygian?
He does like at least, well, we can go into Mare, but for most of our examples, like he does give them characters. Like it's not like they're nothing blank slates that he's just like, we're just gonna have them do this. Like it obviously affects the character and affects the stories and things. So maybe let's talk about Mare, which Mare's a really interesting character that, in Mistborn we don't get flashbacks, right? So we've never really seen Mare on screen, really.
We do get one in Secret History.
In Secret History, we get a flashback.
That's a good point. Oh, I forgot.
Yeah, no. And Mare, I think she fits the Lost Lenore trope very well in that even though we never see her on screen, she died, quite a bit before the book started. But she's hugely significant. Like she's what spurs Kelsier's whole change in pace, and she's the center of kind of some of the character conflict between, say, Marsh and Kelsier.
Yeah.
She's who brought Kelsier and Sazed together, and she's frequently compared, like she's just like, she's a very central character to the books, even though she never appears on screen except for the one flashback.
Like, her drawing of a flower is like one of the most important objects in that trilogy. That passes from person to person.
It's like, yes, the memory of a flower that, the world doesn't have to look like this.
And she's definitely idealized as well, both by Marsh and by Kelsier. Mare is kind of like, she definitely has that the most amazing woman ever feel to her.
Which is interesting because also Kelsier's wondering like if Mare betrayed them, which is a nice dichotomy actually. It's like, so there's some idealization, but it's like, oh man, did she betray us?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, like he definitely believes that she betrayed him. That it's only like later, like Vin proposes, like once she figures out that like, hey, the Lord Ruler can pierce copper clouds, that like it's possible, like that's what he was referring to when he thanked her, that like maybe she didn't betray him.
Yeah. I have a question on that. Did you as readers, did anyone actually think Mare betrayed him when you were reading it for the first time? Or did everyone kind of assume that she didn't?
I
wondered. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, maybe she did. I was there.
Yeah.
I think for me, knowing that Mare sacrificed her life by giving Kelsier her bead of Otium was a sign to me of she didn't actually betray him. She still loved him and would have done anything to protect him. So I once never really read her as like actually having betrayed him.
I genuinely don't remember.
Yeah.
It's too long ago.
It has been a while since I've reread Era 1.
The first time I read Mistborn, like, because it was the first Brandon book I read, has to have been over a decade at this point. It's like, I don't remember.
How do you do so good? And what's that Cosmere character? Just, that's crazy.
I can remember
the wiki
thing. I don't remember how I felt about it because I
Yeah.
read that
Right,
book so
right,
many
okay.
times that it all just blurs together.
Yeah.
I'm just staring at you like, what a savant here.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Like you read it so many times, and I obviously I can't remember either. But I was thinking about, did Brandon, is that a genuine question he wanted the reader to have, or is it a question Kelsier had, and he was like telecasting enough though that the reader was always kind of on Mare's side? I don't know. Like the one potential explanation, of course, for her if she had betrayed him would be, well, Kelsier's kind of a megalomaniac, and maybe Mare had a better good reason and then felt bad for it and gave him the geode. And Kelsier kind of thinks this too, like maybe she gave me the geode to like atone for betraying me. But I don't really, I'm not sure how much that suspicion undermines her idealization, because Kelsier still like loves her so much. Even
Well, I don't think it undermines it. I think it.
Yeah.
I think it actually strengthens it, because it's in the face of evidence, Kelsier still wants to believe that she.
I guess
did
that's
it.
true. Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
he's
he has
sort of
that
like,
conversation with Vin that like
The evidence points to her betraying me, but you know what? I just can't believe it. So I think that.
Yeah, like he has a line with Vin where it's like, I don't know, but I want to believe that she didn't betray me.
It has been so long since I first read it, but I don't think I truly thought Mare betrayed him. But there was a time where I'm like, I'm not really sure, but I never really like totally bought into her actually
I
betraying
would
him.
have been interested in it, because I'm like, oh, that's a way to do the dead wife thing without it being like. I remember having that thought like back.
That's
like,
true.
Even like almost a decade ago, it was like, hey, this would be like less of a like a, oh, my poor lost wife, and more of a, oh, maybe she was bad. That would have been interesting.
That would have
so
been
I was
interesting
like,
for sure.
yeah.
It,
So I
it
would
gave her some
more-
character, and so it made her very interesting from the beginning.
True.
And it wasn't just, to talk about fridging, like it never really felt like, oh, the Lord Ruler like fridged Mare to get at Kelsier, like that, like, because he didn't care about Mare or Kelsier really. He was just like, oh,
right.
Screw you guys. You're beneath my notice, but I caught you, so
Off
be
to
gone.
the pits with you.
Off to the pits. And so I think for me, Mare was always a character and like fairly fully realized. And although her death had plot purpose and was obviously for a very plot significant reason, I don't know. And it also, I think the fact that she had some agency in that she chose like her manner of death, right? Like the self-sacrifice rather than the
She was just murdered by the Lord Ruler just randomly or something.
Yeah.
Brandon does definitely use the dead spouse a lot, and so I think it's easy to poke fun at it in an overall sense, but like in any specific example, I don't know with like dead spouses that I have any issue with any specific one. It's just when you look at it from a large sense, it's like, oh, there's a lot of dead spouses and there's a lot of dead parents.
Yeah.
It was like,
And
when you look at the pattern of dead wives, it's like,
it's kind of a lot.
And it is, as we're going to see, it is quite gendered. We're predominantly talking about women. And part of that might be a product of, older protagonists that Brandon's talking about are heterosexual men. So, a lot of the female characters he's written have been younger, too young potentially to have a dead spouse, until we get to like the Stormlight Archive and we can talk a bit about.
Well, like a fun example, like a counter example is like Telson, right? Where it's like, oh, she's captured, but it's like, oh, that's actually not what happened at all. And I think some of the newer protagonists Brandon has done this better, right?
Yeah. And that's actually a good, unless anyone has something else to say about Mare, that's kind of a good segue to our next example, potentially.
I think I'm good on Mare. I wish I'd read it more recently, but I think I recalled enough of my emotions about it.
Yeah. It's been so long since I've read Mistborn 1 in particular.
Yeah. And it's interesting seeing like Kelsier's thoughts about Mare in terms of like the mini flashback we got in Secret History, where it's like their relationship perhaps wasn't quite as smooth as he likes to remember it.
Absolutely.
Which I think is natural. Like once someone is gone, you remember the good things and try to forget the bad things.
Even just with breakups, right?
And if you look at who Kelsier is, there is no way he had a perfect relationship. I'm sorry, like.
Well, and he just lived, and they both lived just a very hard life. So, like, obviously, it's not going to be like, sunshine and roses all the time because the sun's red.
Both very intelligent, highly motivated, ambitious, capable people with strong opinions. Like it's. Yeah.
I will say something else. Something that just came to me is like this isn't true for all of the cases we're going to talk about today, but it's the thing about Mare's dream becoming Kelsier's goal. This is just like on a meta level. Like, of course, like this how it works in the book makes total sense. And I'm not like it's not about whether it's believable to me or not. But like in a meta sense, I'm talking about this. The dead wife's goals become his goals, and that it's sort of what bothers kind of me as a reader when just looking at it from the outside is that she never gets to see her own goal achieved. And so like there is sort of this thing with like with the dead characters, the living survivor wants to like do it for them. But in these cases, it's sort of like if this specific part of it was the pattern, I think I would be a lot more bothered. But since I can only just apply it to Mare. It's that like it's like the woman's dream is kind of like taken away from her, and it becomes it's her dream, but it's Kelsier's achievement.
Yeah.
So like my first time reading it, I hadn't really read a lot of the other Cosmere, and so like I was like, like what if it had been Mare who survived and did this? Like that would have been an interesting book, but it needed to be Kelsier, right? For a few reasons, he becomes pretty significant later on, but it's always like, why is it that he gets to be the significant one, and she has and she just like is in the past a memory of like, oh, that was such a nice dream. I'm glad she had that.
Well, and it's interesting too because he kind of uses Mare to moralize Kelsier. Like Mare becomes like Kelsier's conscience in a way, and I think he subverts that by letting us realize over time that Kelsier isn't as great as we think. And I think even Kelsier, he's kind of lying to himself a bit about I'm doing this for Mare because I think his ego.
Kelsier stealing dreams? Yeah, that's so out of character for him.
But I hear what you're saying, Gray, definitely, because it takes some of her agency away in a way and allows Kelsier to profit or benefit as a character.
Grace?
Yeah. I do think though, and I like that in Mistborn, Marsh does kind of call Kelsier out on this.
Yeah.
He definitely he resents Kelsier, and he's very angry and annoyed that like Kelsier didn't care, and this was like his dream and it was Mare's dream, and only after Mare was gone did Kelsier start to care, and he got all the glory. And
oh yeah, like for sure, like it totally works in book, it totally works in world, in characterization. Just my problem with it is only like on the meta level of like
and you know, for an example of how to like manage tropes, or if you know a trope has a problematic aspect to it, like putting a foil in like Marsh or putting a foil in like Marsh to like call the character on it, I think is a good way to handle some of those negative implications.
Like at least the writer's aware of it.
The writer's aware of it, and the character isn't just getting away with it, like they're being held accountable at least in some realm.
And one other thing that makes this whole like it was her dream but Kelsier's achievement is like Alex Featherrider has a very big bone to pick with Kelsier because he doesn't go into the beyond to be with Mare.
Yeah.
Potentially, we don't know what the beyond is, but he sticks around.
I think her issue is not so much the being with Mare part, but it's the she just hates that he got to cheat again.
But it does go to Kelsier being like, oh, you like to sit in the mist and think about Mare being beside you and everything.
You didn't have a chance.
Really,
when it comes down to it,
quite a bit about you.
Right.
And it's not as much about getting Mare's dream to come true. And another, I guess, subversion too, Shannon, is in Mistborn. It's not actually Kelsier who achieves the goal. Vin does.
I like that. Okay.
It's
Kelsier did have to die even if he came back.
Yeah, and Vin is often compared to Mare, right?
That's
so
good.
There's kind of this. There's a lot of like lines about Vin being like the daughter Mare would have wanted, I think there's also some lines about them even being visually similar, like they both have kind of dark hair.
So does that make it better or worse that she doesn't get to live to meet Mare or meet Vin? It's always.
I think it just makes it more complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's sort of like like I think that like this kind of thinking it's sort of like this is something only a dead character can have. It's like this concept of legacy. It's like we don't actually know what Mare really would have thought of Vin. We just have the idealized guesses of what we think she would have.
Yeah,
I think that also can be a sign of when this trope is used well. If it creates complication, that's interesting. I think when it's not used well, it can be simplifying things like, oh, we don't want this spouse in there complicating things, so we're going to remove them.
Yeah.
So I think when it's used to simplify things, that's when we can run into like fridging or like something that's really cheap. But when it's used as a complication that's not just kind of a one-off, I think that's a sign that it's an interesting use of the trope.
Yeah, and I totally agree. My thing is like she's the first one we're going to be looking at, but this is one of those things where it's sort of like once is fine, once is great. This really works, but then you start to look at it in the pattern of like, why does it always have to be the wife who's the dead one who complicates things? You know, it's like as we're talking about, this is going to get gendered.
It is.
It is. This isn't us making this up. This is the data.
So Brandon, kill more husbands.
Kill more husbands.
Kill more husbands.
Kill more husbands. Let the woman's life be complicated. You know.
Yeah. I mean, he has gotten better writing female characters. Like that's just a
we're
fact.
also talking about books that are like now like over a decade old. So.
Yeah, right. Well, so he would probably agree.
To move on to a newer book, we can talk about Lessie / Palm in the Wax and Wane series, who is kind of a subversion, of course, because Wax only thinks she's dead. But then he kills her again, and she is
he kills her the first time and the second time.
He kills her twice.
And this is another thing we're going to talk about in some other examples, but a lot of these other ones, the husband actually causes the death, which is
slightly slightly problematic. But it does make for it makes it very personal to the character.
Very personal.
And honestly, I think Lessie's first death kind of does have that fridging feel to it, almost like just with how it's set up with Bloody Tan, like being like, I've got your love interest here.
Right.
Like chapter 1, we don't get any characterization for
it's
this
literally
woman.
prologue.
She's just there to die and make Wax sad.
Yeah, and that's how it kind of feels in Alloy.
I think I would probably put that more in the Phrygian than the Lenore. Yeah.
We talked about one of the aspects of these dead characters being idealized, and I think Palm is one of the strongest examples where she, at the end, is not idealized at all.
Well,
Yeah,
I guess
by the
that
second
depends.
death, for sure.
Yeah.
The first one.
Yeah. No, I think she's idealized at first, but when you get to know her, absolutely. But it does, like, Palm is so interesting, I think, because she complicates things so much. Because, like, me as a reader, I disagree with some of the things she did. I don't necessarily disagree with Palm.
Yeah.
Like there's she raises a lot of questions.
I'm actually going to disagree. Whereas I think after Palm's death, Wax idealizes Lessie and his relationship with Lessie even more.
Ooh.
Because it's like during like the first like 2 books, like she's never actually referred to as his wife. Like they never got formally married. But in the beginning of Bands of Mourning, like he does start referring to her as his wife that he killed twice. And like there's a word of Brandon where somebody asked him about that, because like I think his editor wanted to change that, because like you had to have referred to Leslie as a wife before, like, and Brandon was like, that's because it reflects a change in Wax's thoughts
How he's thinking about
that
her.
whole situation.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There is a strong idealization happening after, as he starts to, as the death keeps impacting him over and over again. I do want to raise a point about, I don't think that their character complicating things, even after their death, is a saving point of this. It definitely makes the story more interesting, but I think it doesn't make the trope any less what it is. Like in terms of Mare complicating Kelsier's life, or Lessie complicating Wax and even Wayne, I'll say, and their relationship.
That's true.
Wayne idealized her in some ways.
Yeah.
Wayne wanted her to be alive, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I kind of see that as an extension of it rather than a subversion. Does that make sense?
This is slightly off topic, but I just realized both Wax and Wayne have a relationship with Akandra. I'd never made that connection before.
I didn't either. Oh no.
Yep.
Oh.
At least Wayne knows that it's a contra.
Yeah, at least Wayne knows. Yeah.
Oh man.
Sorry, that was just
for Wayne,
that's
that's a
just
plus.
Yeah,
Wow.
it is a plus for him.
I mean, I would say that's a plus.
Because like if the Lost Lenore drives the character's motivation and drives the plot, that is a complication in such a way, and it's sort of like the degree to which Brandon pulls it off, like obviously I think in a skilled way, but it doesn't make it any less the Lost Lenore or any less fridging.
Well, and to just carry that through, so like Mare, how Mare's death changed Kelsier's life and kind of changed his direction. He went from being kind of a selfish thief to like a revolutionary with a savior complex. It goes. Wax, of course, gives up his lawman way of life and returns to the city, right? So it's the impetus or the origin of a stark shift in the character's life, which
it's like this is the motivation for you. This is the motivation for you to get better, to get your life on track, to do what really matters. And it's sort of like in both cases, it's like their wake up call.
Although Wax, it's kind of less of a wake, because I think the way Brandon's writing him, he's happier when he's out, being Batman, saving the day.
Yep.
And Leslie's death initially caused him to step back from that. And it wasn't until he got pulled into this stuff that he started doing it again.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I just love when Wax killed Palm time 2. Oh, it's so good. So much suffering.
One of the most, I think, heart impacting moments in that series, definitely. And probably one of my top ones.
So I love probably Shadows of Self better than Bands of Mourning, even though Bands of Mourning is crazy. But
I love Bands more because of the conversation between Wax and Sazed.
Yeah,
That's true.
that's very good.
I
Because,
read
like-
them back to back. I don't remember what was in each book.
Oh man, I really need to reread
pretty much
them, too.
end with the death.
yeah.
Okay.
It's like, all right, problem
Like-
solved.
I guess talking about shadows though, the art like shadow, like Palm Lessie shapes shadows. Like if you need a distinguishing point between the two books, like she is as Bleeder is the main antagonist, right? And so like that, the arc of that book is very much her story. Like she's the moving force. Like everything that happens in that book kind of goes back to her.
Yeah, I think
her
from
actions.
an atmospheric sense, like Shadows is definitely one of the most distinctive Mistborn books, if not Brandon books in general.
He has a very distinct feel to that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Alloy, that series is interesting because he kind of is flirting with the villain of the book trope that comes out of like Westerns or like
That is true.
superheroes, you know, like he kind of does like each, like Miles is very significant in the first book and then Palm in the second. And then he's still but gotten away from that in the later ones because he's doing some bigger things. But
I think we got to
it's
reread these books.
He's definitely like playing with like pulpy genres, like Western, spy thriller, like adventure. Who
like
knows
the
what?
Jules Verne kind of
it.
adventure. Like it's like the steampunky, like it gets into, which I dig. It like it kind of has, it kind of gives me that Jules Verne vibe by the time we get to the end of the third.
Or Indiana Jones.
Yeah, Indiana Jones
definitely
is like
in
the main one I think about when reading bands.
Oh, yeah, it's an Indiana Jones story starring Wax
Like,
and in Mistborn.
I can see like the dotted line going across the map.
Oh, yeah. Which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. Is there anything else you want to talk about on Palm? Lessie?
I just think the trope was a little like more obvious in this case. It's sort of like I think just the way it worked, it was obviously very impactful. I really loved it. It was a great read. But I also think this is like the most obvious example people can point to and go like, Brandon, like this is the conversation I was hearing after these ones came out. It was like, loved it, great. But just hey, we noticed the Mistborn pattern here.
Do you have a dead wife issue, Brandon? Like, yeah.
Emily, do we need to be worried about you?
Also, I think what's interesting that even though she's alive when we think she's dead, she never kind of gives up that lost quality.
Ooh.
Like she never comes back to him.
Yeah.
Lessie, as she was, never comes back. Lessie, the character who Palm was playing, and there's some debate about where the line was. I think there was a lot of blurred. Well, depending how much you believe Palm, because that's still a mystery too, how much Palm, like she's such an enigmatic character, but the character of Lessie is lost at the beginning and never comes back. And then Palm is a very complicated, it is a bit of a subversion, but they're almost separate characters. And in that way, it's kind of not. And she doesn't, it's not revealed, or she doesn't become Lessie again, really, until it's time for her to die. So if you're looking at different versions of like Palm, Bleeder, Lessie as kind of separate characters, Lessie's role in all scenarios is to die to hurt Wax.
Yeah.
If like we do get more like another Era 1 story, or like even a final Empire era before the events of the first trilogy, like I'd really love to like for Palm to be involved, because like she was the Lord Ruler's Contra. Like
I know, it's so cool. I need more of that.
And I'd like to like see her before like she kind of goes crazy.
Yes.
Like not that like
same.
she's
Loses herself. Yeah.
Yep.
It's hard to put the pin on exactly what happened, but yeah.
Well, yeah, that's still like a mystery, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a sign of a good, like when you use this trope well too, leaving the reader wanting more, like making the reader wish, oh, I wish I could read more about Mare and Kelsier's relationship,
Which I do.
or I wish I could read more about Palm. That tells you that you've made the dead character interesting to the reader, and that, you know,
Yeah, like you wish you had more rather than I wish there was just anything about her. I think.
Yeah.
With Lessie though, I never like Lessie. I didn't really care about. I care about Palm a lot, but like Lessie, I was like, whatever. Like that. So
yeah, and that's why I think, like, narratively, even though they're the same person, the two persona are serving different narrative purposes.
Yeah.
And I think
certainly Lessie very much fits the trope. Do we want to talk about Shashara now?
Sure.
This is where I'm going to be like Grace. It's been a million years. So this was my first Cosmere book. My first
Good
Brandon
one to
book.
start. Good one to start.
It was the free one.
You know, I'm obsessed with Shashara. So also an example where the husband kills the wife. And
there are a lot of husbands killing the wife. Like our next example is obviously going to be Dalinar killing Heavy. Right?
Yeah, and Shashara also big change in Vasher. Like, he goes from being like this inventor and involved in world events to withdrawing completely.
Right.
She's the center of the conflict between Vasher and Denth.
They were siblings, weren't they?
Yeah,
Denth and Shashara. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also,
I forgot that.
Yeah. Also,
listen to our 5 scholars episode.
One. She's an interesting one when it comes to idealization, because in terms of her qualities, she's very idealized in that she's like the smartest potentially of the 5 scholars, from Vasher's point of view. She's, just this incredible whatever, but she's not the greatest person necessarily, with the creation and use of Nightblood.
And she was convinced that was good and wanted to give that secret away to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's definitely like the super villain of the many war. It's like,
yeah. Oh, yeah, totally.
Well, at least at the late stage. In the beginning, I'd say Vasher was probably the super villain. But yes.
And the Battle of Twilight Falls is just supposed to be this massacre that made Vasher feel like, even though he loved her, she was too dangerous to be left alive.
Yeah.
One thing I kind of wonder about, though, is like all of the 5 scholars invented things that made killing
except Dan.
So
we don't
much
know what he
easier. Did. Like, when you look at how many life lists, like the total kill count of the life list, is that more or the same or less than Nightblood? Like, I don't know. I mean, obviously Nightblood is very efficient at killing, but she wasn't alone in sharing these secrets to the world.
I kind of see Nightblood as not quite the same level, but like as an atomic bomb of the Cosmere.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's like very destructive. So I do put it. I see what you're saying, though. They all did these inventions that were used for awful things, but I think just looking at how destructive Nightblood is on his own, on its own, the thought of like arming a whole front line of an army with Nightbloods
is pretty terrifying.
Can someone clear up with their memory, like, what exactly did Vasher know about Nightblood at the time that he killed Shashara? Like, did Vasher know what we know, like that Nightblood is potentially, one day possibly Cosmere ending, or
he saw saw Nightblood in action. He saw how destructive it was. Whether or not he knew, like, the full ramifications of that, but he could recognize that, like, hey, having 1,000 of these would be very, very bad.
Yeah.
But and going off of like Grace's point, I don't know if like this maps 100%, but I'm just thinking of the quote is like, 1 death is a tragedy, 1,000 deaths is a statistic. But like kind of like twisting that where it's like Nightblood is very singular and dramatic and flashy. Whereas like the lifeless, like there's thousands of them. Like they're like the faceless horde. It's just like, yes, in aggregate, like they are as deadly as one Nightblood. Nightblood is still far more terrifying, I feel.
Yeah. I would. Nightblood is terrifying.
You touch them and you touch someone, they vaporize. That's like not that's too much power.
What I like about this one is that I think like reading through like just the facts of this one, I think I like this one the best because I actually wouldn't say that she's idealized. I think like Vasher misses her, but I think that's different. I think that not every time you miss someone who's passed, that's idealizing her or someone. And I like that it happened because like of a genuine disagreement feels too small, but it is a disagreement.
It's a strenuous disagreement. Very strenuous.
It's a big strenuous disagreement. It was like something that both of them really wanted to do, and they could, and like they morally couldn't back down on.
Which a core difference in values.
Yeah.
Core difference in values. It's like Shashara obviously didn't see much of a problem with creating more Nightbloods.
Just in case you forgot, Vasher murdered her with Nightblood and Denth witnessed it. So, you can understand why Denth is really upset.
I think if anyone is idealizing Shashara, it is Denth. And to some extent, yes. I think that is the crux of Denth and Vasher's problems, is that Denth is remembering his sister in this very idealized way, and Vasher is remembering her for who she was and her flaws.
Like Vasher could see more clearly what actually happened there, and Denth couldn't accept that there was anything that she did anything wrong or did anything bad.
Yeah, they got
That's
married.
A great point.
They got married shortly before creating Nightblood, and just it was a short marriage, to say the least.
It makes me wonder how that marriage actually was. If they were together very briefly and then they had a huge disagreement and he killed her, like, what did that relationship actually look like?
Well, I think it was longer. They were together longer than they were married.
Yes, true.
I think it was just like they finally decided to like formalize things. And
great timing,
I also think on that point, I wonder if the idealization of Shashara happened more before her death. Like Vasher idealized her and was maybe blind to some of her ambitions or some of her flaws that kind of he couldn't ignore anymore after she used Nightblood in battle and wanted to make more of him.
Or maybe Vasher was the one whose ideals shifted because he did start the mini war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like this is now too much. This has gone on too much. I must end this.
Yeah, it grew too far. Like he had a purpose, presumably, to start the mini war, and then it just blew up. Like I don't think he was anticipating it to become as large a conflict as it ended up becoming.
He certainly did not.
Well, and if you see like war or like stuff as a stuff that happens, you could kind of almost see creating lifeless as a good thing. It's like, oh, I can save lives by creating lifeless. If our guards and our soldiers are these automatons, then we're saving like human life, but not realizing that could spur bigger conflicts and actually make more deaths overall.
Yep.
I do like this one, not because I don't think her death changed anything, which is also like why, like Vasher had changed his mind before he killed Shashara, so it wasn't like her death didn't motivate him, it didn't change him. It was sort of like they had this disagreement before anything happened.
He killed her because he changed his mind.
Yeah, it was
true.
And I just like the situation better.
Mhm.
It's I think it gives Shashara more agency than it gives the others. It was sort of
Mhm.
So I was just thinking,
she's more
has agency.
mysterious. I think we see on screen much less of her, but
Way less. She's not mentioned much at all.
we know the very little about her. She's almost a total mystery. All we see is just on screen are like the things that Vasher tells us, that the things that she's created essentially, and the fact that she wanted to keep doing more of this. So the fact that her entire legacy is that she had to be stopped from doing more of the bad, creating things like Nightblood and unleashing them on the world. It's sort of like this is one of those cases where it's like, yeah, I totally buy into the reason why her death had to happen. It's because of her agency. It wasn't taken away.
Yeah.
And she's also still, like, when you compare to Mare, kind of, or like the stealing her dream angle that you talked about with Kelsier.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely clear that Shashara's aims have been thwarted. Like, part of me still feels like there's stuff she set in motion that is still in motion and affecting the universe.
The creation of Nightblood by itself. Yeah.
Which is a cross-cosmere, like Nightblood was originally intended for Stormlight Archive, and in some ways Warbreaker is Nightblood's origin story.
Mhm.
Significant that Nightblood still thinks of Shashara as alive. Like, Nightblood is this really significant item in the Cosmere, and she's always, even though we're not getting a lot of information about her, she gets like touched on continually, because Nightblood will be like, oh, well, Shashara said this, or she thought that, or told me.
It's like her goals are still out there. She's still affecting the world. Like almost like on a personal level. Like, Nightblood is like one of those ones, like I can't even say like, oh, Nightblood is just stealing, like, or trying to copy or emulate. It's like Nightblood doesn't have the capacity almost to do that. It's Nightblood is just like, yeah, Shashara's great.
One of my favorite Shashara factoids is that Shashara taught Nightblood that swearing is evil and don't swear, because she was trying to explain what being evil was, and like that was one thing, which is why it's like, oh, you shouldn't swear, which is just like really funny to me.
Oh no,
that's the thing that Shashara did. Is that funny?
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
One thing that's I kind of thought of while we were discussing Shashara is I think it would be very interesting to compare Denth with Kelsier in terms of their motivations and their actions, because I think there is a potential for a lot of similarities between them. If you actually go back and look, like, they were both motivated by the death of a loved one that they came to idealize and spent their life working to take down the person responsible. And
that's a really good point, because in a lot of ways, Warbreaker is a direct response to Mistborn. It's like there's like the whole a very colorful world after a very like drab world, and it's like Brennan has repeatedly said that Kelsier in another story would have been the villain, and Denth is that.
He might still be the villain.
He might still be.
And that's, I think, I agree, a really good point, because I think if the story had been written from Denth's point of view, Shashara could be his fridged sister who was killed off by the evil Vasher to get at Denth. You know what I mean? Like, it.
Yeah.
From his point of view, it could have come across that way very, very easily.
You know, Denth is the character that Brandon has said, oh, like, he would be cast as the typical hero, even though he's the villain. And Kelsier is the charismatic hero who would be the villain of another story.
Yeah.
I love Warbreaker.
That's a great parallel.
I love just the reversals in Warbreaker. Oh, so good.
Yeah.
Brennan has at one point mentioned the possibility of a Warbreaker secret history. And so, like, I don't know if he like
all of us
to be like after with like oh, how does Nightblood get to Roshar, blah, blah, blah.
Roshar.
I would have liked to see like that as like the 5 scholars. Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
what were the 5 scholars like?
That's
I would love that.
like we were, I think in our 5 scholar episode, we were like, man, we want to get more 5 scholars. Like, what were they like? Like Shashara was called Glory Singer, one of my favorite return names.
Yeah.
Just
They're great names.
so
Yeah.
awesome. And just like
Great
seeing Vasher, Denth, and Shashara working together on the side of Hanald, and just seeing what their relationship is like, what Denth did. Like, we still don't really know what he actually did as a scholar.
No.
It's really, we have no achievements for him whatsoever currently.
He did something. We don't know what.
We literally have no idea.
Like, it'd be almost funny because like 5 is a very important like number on Nalthis, relatively speaking. Like, there's the 5
right.
visions.
Yep.
So like, what if it's like, oh, we have like these 4 like really smart people. It'd be really awesome if there was 5. Oh wait, that one has a brother. Like, let's just lump him in.
Let's lump him in. He can be one of us. Just round it out.
Well, you see that even with like real world pantheons, right? Like for the Greeks, 12 was a significant number, and then like I think it was Dionysus started getting bigger, and they're like, oh, but we only can have 12 main Olympians, so they ditched one of the older Hestia, I think. So
Which
if you
is
look at who are the 12
Choose
Olympians,
wrong.
there's 2 different versions
That's
Oh,
hilarious.
because they wanted to keep it at 12.
That's so funny.
That'd be funny. I'd love the flashback and Death was just there.
Yeah, that's just there.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, Arsteel's just like a swordsman, as far as we know right now. Presumably,
Yeah.
Denth and Arsteel did actually do scholarly things.
Then
Yeah.
then
Presume.
was on the field trip to Roshar. So
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, Shashara is great. I would love to see like a point of view from her, just like that battle.
Mhm.
Oh man,
Mhm.
sweet.
So yeah, another example of also Brandon leaving us wanting more, right? Like I think that's a huge one where we're
Really like the
wanting more.
agency argument though, because it's like, no, you're not killed to cause someone to suffer. It's we have a disagreement and you cannot be allowed to live.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's not Phrygian or the Lost Lenore if she's the villain who needs to be stopped. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
That's a really good point.
that's why, because she's
You can
set up
have
as a
female
Lost
villains.
Lenore, I
Yeah.
think, but it
It's
is
an
definitely a
interesting-
subversion. It's a fun remixing of it, which is what I think makes it such a good use.
we
of
can
the
have
trope.
female villains. Like it's like if she was
Yes.
the only female character in the book, then it would be like that's why you can never have like only one of the demographic you're trying to represent.
Mhm.
But we have Ciri and Vivenna,
We got plenty.
you know, who are like the 2 main characters of this book. This is a female-driven book, female-led
Yeah.
book.
Oh yeah.
You know, female villains. Let's go.
Yeah.
Shashara was
And then Blushweaver is
Blushweaver.
like a very
Blushweaver.
like
hell yeah.
Great character.
character.
Warbreaker is definitely a book where it's like, all right, let's
Mhm.
put more.
And then there's
women in it.
Jewel.
Well, you know, she's not good. So we can have female villains. That's fine. she's not good. So I think we got to talk about the you know, Lessie's one thing, but we got to talk about the main Cosmere spouse who died on screen because of her husband.
not
Dalinar-
on screen. He tossed the fire in and then closed the door and walked away.
The actions that led to her death were directly on screen.
yeah. So we got to talk about Dalinar's wife, which I pronounce Evi, and you know, that's what I'm gonna do.
Eevee.
No,
Eevee.
Matt, you're muted. What's up, Matt?
I was saying shh.
Oh yeah, well you're muted.
I wasn't close enough to the mic.
Oh yeah.
Maybe to pick up the correct pronunciation of Evi's name is shh.
Yes, of course. No one can argue that this one didn't have extreme plot significance.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
like this one in that it really recontextualizes why all the Alethi on the Shattered Plains and Way of Kings are like, Dalinar, you lost your touch. You were so horrible before, because they all remember what happened and Dalinar doesn't.
context, horrible in this case was a positive thing for them. So they were
Right,
like,
yeah,
we
I'm
want you
not
to be
saying that the
horrible
Alethi are good
be
here.
horrible again.
Yeah, why don't you just be more horrible again? It's like, oh yeah, you burned the city to the ground.
Mhm.
So scary. Now you're not scary. Don't tell me to do anything.
Yeah. So it
Yeah.
recontextualizes all of that and obviously has a lot to do with Dalinar and his entire arc and discovering the way of kings and everything.
This is one of those ones where like it fits the trope, but it has nothing to do with my enjoyment. I love this so much. It feels it was very powerful. I enjoyed the story very much. So I just want to say I should have said this at the beginning, but like just because we're talking about it matching the trope doesn't mean we don't like it.
Mhm.
Just to make that clear, I love the story with Dalinar and Evi, but it does match. It does fit the
matches,
pattern.
but it's very affecting.
Yeah,
Like
it's a good use of the trope.
And it affects
And-
Dalinar.
And it doesn't, it's not actually, in some ways, like there are some, like it's changed enough. Like, for example, like the Lost Lenore trope or the dead, often it's, you know, they're so present on the character's mind and they're really motivating them. And for the first two books, Dalinar can't think about her, right? Like, so, and she is idealized almost in her absence. Like, he's like, well, I think I must have loved her a lot because I had to forget about her. But yeah, like she's almost more, if it wasn't handled the way it was, it could have felt more like, oh, we just need a dead wife off camera, no name, no anything, no character detail. But it was handled in a way, like he did that in a way that it was, there's a plot reason for it to be that way. And it's, her absence almost spoke louder than her presence would have.
Yeah.
It's like
Like
an
she was-
impact crater. It's like you
Yeah.
see the impact of it, but you don't know what caused it. And then
Yeah.
when you actually see the moment happen, it's that much more powerful. Like this
Yes.
isn't like a little like a little knock on the head that like changes his direction in life. This is like this changes everything. Like
Yep.
she no one can argue she's not important.
Yeah.
And I think we all knew, at least I expected from book one, that we were going to get some version of Oathbringer eventually, where we were going to, like, that's a pretty big promise that Brandon is making with the, like, with the and the all that stuff, that we're going to get to the bottom of this eventually.
Yeah.
And
to launch off of that is, in like writing terms, like Brennan often uses the frames to hang a lantern on something, which is to draw attention, the reader's attention, to something that like is important but might not be addressed just yet. It's like kind of foreshadowing, where it's like he hangs a whole lot of lanterns during Way of Kings
Over and over again.
like with like the and it's like and it's like not being able to remember, like that's making a promise that like one that he is going to remember at some point, and that it's going to be important. Like he has to have forgotten her for a reason, and it can't just be like, oh, I must have loved her too much, because that would be the boring answer.
And the fact that Stormlight is structured to have flashbacks, like I was so excited. It's like, what's going to happen with Evi?
I do think, though, contrasting how Dalinar thinks about Evi to Adolin, we do not hear, he does not really think about his mother at all, which I think for the first few books is necessary because we need to see those events unfold through Dalinar. But I do hope that in the future, now that that is out of the way, we do get to see him think about his mother more.
Yeah,
that's true.
I think it kind of works because Adolin doesn't really have, he doesn't really have an internal life as the character. He kind of does. He works the character role, I should say. He's a very active, present character. But yes, I agree. I hope there's a little bit more internal life in Adolin and Renarin that we can see, because we don't actually see their reaction to the truth.
Yeah.
At the end of Oathbringer.
Right.
And I think Adolin and Renarin, like you said, like as an absent spouse, she's very significant. As an absent mother, it kind of just feels like, oh, Dalinar's always been a single parent, which after Oathbringer we're like, no, like she was. It's very important that Dalinar did not raise these two boys because they would not be the people that
they would not be the people they are today.
And you get little nods like Adolin, I think his pre-duel rituals, there's something that
he has his mother's chain that he keeps on.
But I agree with you, like but I do think it served a narrative purpose, and that Brandon didn't want to, like, because it kind of defeats the purpose of the whole like whisper it out thing to then switch to an Adolin chapter and him being like, oh yeah, my mom Evi, she was really great, and she was, like,
and she died at the rift, and my dad did the big revenge too because he was so upset that she died. Like, it's like I wouldn't even put her in like the dead parent category, at least at the end of Oathbringer, because it's sort of like that's just not how she's played in the books that we see.
I also think it kind of reminds me of how Brandon handled the Kelsier's secret plan arc in Mistborn, where he's kind of deliberately lying by omission to the reader.
Right.
And I think
just thinking about that
to a lesser extent, but I think that's kind of what he's doing with Adolin and Renarin's, and Renarin less so because he barely gets viewpoints. But with Adolin, he's kind of just being like, oh, Adolin thinks about his mom, but during the scene when we're with him, that's just not on his mind.
That's not the focus.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I agree it would be good to have more of that, because, well, Evi with the kids was super cute in Oathbringer.
I think as of right now, I'm okay with it. But if going forward there wasn't more of that starting to get introduced, I'd be kind of disappointed.
I think we do need to see it from the, Adolin and Renarin's perspective, for sure.
And we do know in the back 5, there's going to be a Renarin book, which will presumably have Renarin flashbacks.
Presumably.
Yeah.
And he's pretty young, so I kind of hope his mom will show up in them.
Yeah.
She has to be in at least one.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I really liked the Oathbringer flashbacks, like, because they felt different than the other ones. Like they were so they were so intertwined with Dalinar's current story, but like, and they felt, I don't know if this is even true, but it felt like there was more of them to me. Like Evi got really characterized. Dalinar's past with her got really characterized and shaped.
I think another part of that is, again, what we talked about at the beginning about why people use dead spouses, is part of it's to give history, right? And Dalinar is an older character, right? Like Shallan and Kaladin's were both kind of like, this is my childhood. Whereas we never even see Dalinar as a child, right? Like his first
we will skip all of that.
He's I think he's in his late teens, early 20s in the first
something like that.
He's like 18 or something, and he's killing folk, and he's
killing folk. And so his flashbacks cover a longer period of time in some ways, and it's also like they're juicier for that reason. Like I think it's really enjoyable. Like a lot of times it's like, oh, my protagonist is 21 and that's the age the protagonist has to be, because they're just starting out on their journey, or they're just it's a good tool for to get the reader in. With like a 55-year-old man, and then you get into like there is so much more of like this is why the character is the way that he is, and it feels bigger and stronger.
Seeing that unfold, it's like, and I understand you.
Especially in Dalinar's case, when he's so different at 18 or 20 or 30 as he is at 50, 55-ish. And then like even like his characterization becomes part of the mystery. And so we know that it's because of Evi, and now. And so like when her mystery, the mystery of Evi, the dead wife, being unveiled, it's sort of like, for one, it's like, as the Lost Lenore, I don't think she's idealized to the reader is the thing, because it's sort of like we get to see her for the real person that she was. She's not a mystery to us anymore. It's not like she's forever slated to be the idealized dead wife, and she impacted them so much. It's like, no, we actually really got to see the character that she was and like the events of it, like it's I don't think it was just like let's tuck the dead wife away for motivation purposes. Like this was this was so impactful.
Yeah. And on that point, I really like how she's so different from the previous examples we looked at, because the others, like, yes, they're different, but like Shashara, Mare, Palm, all of or Lessie, I guess, all three are portrayed as like very brilliant, very interesting, very
strong and powerful, and
powerful women, like superhero women. Like they're all kind of fall into that. Whereas Evi is like, she's a good mom and she wants what's best for her kids and she wants her marriage to be happy and isn't satisfied with all the aspects of it. And like she's a lot more average in her portrayal.
Yeah. Yes. And it's
which is cool.
Yeah, and because she's not a Lethe, like she tries very hard to be a good Alethi wife. She just isn't good at it because it just feels so wrong to her.
Right.
And and circling back to like the idealization being more on Dalinar's part, and it's like looking at how when his memories were gone, like his view of her or what he thinks it must have been compared to like how he actually felt about her is very different. Because like I don't know if he actually did love her. Like it was kind of a political marriage.
Yeah, and that's like the whole picture of like Dalinar isn't like, oh, my lost love. It's like, this is the woman I failed. I failed, like I failed her in every way. I failed her as like to be a good husband. I failed her as like to like her idea of like I didn't support her. I didn't father our children very well. It was like and eventually he killed her. So it was like the series of this woman being failed is like and her not even her being the kind of character she can't save herself. She can't make this. She doesn't have, for whatever reason, like the ability or capacity to like make Dalinar be better. She can't she can't do it. She's not the kind of white, like he was like a storm. He was like a force unto himself who's going to change Dalinar Colin.
Yeah.
But in a way, like she does end up changing him. Like her death is what changes him into the man she always believed he could be.
Right. And
granted, it was her death and then him forgetting about her.
Him forgetting about it, yeah. What's interesting, too, I think if Brandon had continued some of the patterns from the previous books, it would have been like Navani type character. If Navani had been the dead spouse, she would have very much fallen in line, like this passionate love. They have this like chemistry, like that would have fallen more in line with the ones we've seen before. Whereas with Evi, like it's different, but she's still motivating that change. And I just love how Brandon uses her too to kind of further highlight issues with Alethi culture, because our protagonists are so Alethi centric that they don't notice the things that are wrong necessarily. Whereas she like, points out, oh, like the women are so mean to me, and everything has to be an argument or a conversation, or
everything has to be so witty, and I'm just like, and if you're not witty,
like I'm tired of trying to prove that I'm smart all the time, or prove this or prove that. Like I just want to be.
I think one of the first things we really learn about Evi is when Dalinar asks Navani about her, and Navani says like, she was kind of slow, which I think both
was a little mean-spirited.
Mean-spirited, and also serves as an example of contrasting Evi and how people saw her with the other woman we talked about, where they were very smart, capable women, whereas with Evi, after she died, people around her were like, she was a little slow, nice, but
Yeah, but it was nice, like like slow to an Alethi, but it was sort of like, when you look at her, you're like, oh no, she's not actually stupid. She's like a normal
just
person.
average.
Yeah.
She's just an average nice person.
But to an Alethi, like a in that level of society that they were at, where you can't be average. It's like
exactly.
And I think also what the flashbacks do a good job of is showing that a lot of the times when Dalinar is dismissive of Evi, it's not actually because of a personal characteristic. It's because of like cultural differences. It's not that, she's an idiot or she's this or whatever. It's that, Dalinar doesn't understand where she's coming from because they were raised in different cultures. And I kind of like that.
And she gets sad and
Yeah. Or like, how she's like praying for this, or she's doing like it's cultural difference. It kind of reminds me actually of some actors or like celebrities have talked about where English isn't their first language, how they're like, they'll be like, oh, I'm really funny and quick with improv in my home language, but I come across as like a ditz or as like a slow in English because it's my second language. And I kind of see that with
Sofia Vergara scene in Modern Family.
Yeah. So
that,
Sofia Vergara is a good example.
You know how smart I am in Spanish? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like is this her second language for Evi?
I mean, I'd have
yes, it 100% would be.
Yeah. I think Evi is someone who Brandon handled really well. He obviously thought a lot, and her story is kind of the centerpiece of Oathbringer, right? And I really like what he did with that concept in that story.
Oh, and it just makes the whole point of flashbacks Oathbringer makes it worth it. To have the flashbacks connecting with the main plot, and it just fit together so well. Oh, I love it. As a plot person, I just love that. So
it worked so well for every aspect of the story, and it all centered on Evi and who she was, and it was like this is like there's no way I can possibly be mad at this use of the trope. Like it was so powerful.
Yeah.
She wasn't just a blank. She wasn't just there to make Dalinar sad.
Well, she was a blank until she wasn't.
You know what I mean?
She was a blank.
Once we got to know her, it's like she wasn't just the.
And she was a blank that we knew was going to be filled in.
Yeah.
Like, because Brandon could have written that, Dalinar's wife died. And then just left it at that, right? Like, that's what some books have done. And yeah.
Let's talk about a few other examples, maybe a little more quickly, because there's a lot of dead characters who shadow other characters.
Yeah, so these are ones which maybe we don't need to go as in depth in, but just kind of offer interesting similarities but are different. The first one to include a male spouse is Gavilar, who is idealized in some ways. And part of it, I think, is we haven't gotten much Navani viewpoints on Gavilar yet. But
criminally underdone in Oathbringer flashbacks.
Yeah.
Navani, Gavilar, and Dalinar's relationship. Really.
I think that might have been.
I'm sure it's intentional. Yeah.
And Gavilar also serves as a sibling version of this for Dalinar, I think. Like that kind of, because Dalinar idealizes Gavilar. Gavilar's death in the opening chapter of every book is what spurs.
I don't think I would even put him in like the dead spouse, because I think Navani and Gavilar have been intentionally left a little blank on purpose. Like this is a mystery that is slowly being filled in, but I don't know. I also don't think it's necessarily a big one. I think the character of Gavilar is a bigger mystery than the mystery of like what Navani and Gavilar's relationship is like.
And like
I would put him in like the dead brother more. Serves more important that way.
Yeah, similar to how Evi is more of a dead spouse than a dead mother. It's like Gavilar is more of a dead brother than a dead spouse or parent.
For the purpose of the story,
Exactly. No, I agree. And that's why I think not one of the main ones, but there's argument that he could fit in.
His death really hangs a shadow over the
Yes.
series. Really.
Yeah, he is a significant death in the way that this trope can be.
And then it's like there is that line in Way of Kings, I think, where Navani is like, Gavilar wasn't the man you thought he was,
Yep.
and Dalinar just doesn't want to hear it. Like
Yep.
he's the
Yeah.
one at idealizing
Yep.
Gavilar, not Navani.
Well, and yeah, Dalinar has an issue with that, I think, because he also we see him in action idealizing Navani as well. As you know, like I think he likes to put people on and with Adolin too.
He's really good at that. Actually, we're seeing
like
a
he's like,
pattern
oh,
here.
Adolin's like the best of us or whatever.
Dalinar really
but-
needs to believe the best of people. I feel like
Yeah.
I feel like maybe he's in a different place now, but like maybe maybe it was just something about like his memory and like the way his character changed. But I feel like he needed to believe. People.
The little glimpses we do get of Gavilar and Navani's relationship in the flashback is like Navani trying to talk about Fabriols and Gavilar just like not caring at all.
Yeah. But going into like Dalinar's personality, like Brandon has said, like he's someone that believes like the great man stance on history, where it's like a single like great person can change the course of history, which isn't quite accurate. So it makes sense that like he does idealize like individuals that rather than the aggregate of humanity.
Yeah, definitely. See, even with Gavilar, we're delving back into Dalinar's character.
Yeah,
the next one I came up with was a subversion in Raoden, just because I think if you took out the Raoden viewpoints in Elantris, he would be this for Serene in a way. It's less so because they're not married yet, but we know they were kind of falling in love and
they were betrothed.
And she gets there and she's a widow, and his death kind of drives her part of the story until you realize that until she realizes that he's alive. And it's just less of this because for the reader, they know he's alive the whole time.
Right.
If that had been like a Palm situation where it was revealed, it might have fallen more into this. And it would be cool because then it would be a male example, which
that's true.
We don't.
It really is a Palm, very close to a Palm example.
Yeah. Except he doesn't stay dead, and we know it the whole time.
One that's good is Tindwyl, who like we obviously see her a bunch in Well of Ascension, but it does sort of serve as that dead lover in Hero of Ages.
Yeah. This is actually one I don't think is handled as well, because like her death like is still something that kind of annoys me. It's like I don't think it. This is definitely more of a fridging situation.
Like this wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
And I think especially when you look at what Brandon's plans were for Sazed, he kind of needed Sazed to be unattached. So at the end, he could become the Hero of Ages. So it does feel like, you wanted to introduce Tindwyl to show Sazed as like a romantic person and kind of show that side of him. And she serves a lot of roles in that book. She's a really great character. But then you're like, but then we need to get rid of her because for the grand finale, we need Sazed to be ready to give up everything.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Because like she does die off screen.
Yeah. I'll take a husband killing their spouse on screen versus off screen deaths all the time.
And on the fridging, I think she's in like a pile of bodies in snow because wasn't it snowing at the time? So kind of
definitely, it was
that fridge element.
Yeah, well, and like fridging part of it is like, if they die off screen, and the character discovers that there's that dimension.
Well, it's less about her struggle to survive and failing, and more about Sazed's reaction. To it.
Yeah,
and it's like like they were stationed at like separate ends of the city, so like Sazed could not have seen her death,
right?
But we do see Doxson's death, and he was not from his point of view, and he wasn't a viewpoint character through most of the book. It's like, okay, like you did it for Doxson, but you didn't do it for Tindwyl.
Yeah.
We could have seen Tyndall's final stand, but we didn't.
That's true. I agree. But I mean, Well of Ascension isn't my favorite book, let's just say. So, I just put another one into the Well of Ascension column.
Yeah. Another one is not a spouse, but Tien serves this role very much in terms of like the idealization and kind of the driving force. Like Tien is this for Kelsey or for Kaladin.
Yep.
K names. They're K names.
K names. K and
Like,
V names.
And I think part of it too is just a product of Kaladin being a younger character. Like having a dead spouse probably wouldn't have made sense, but
Oh boy.
But Tien serves the role that we see dead spouses serve for other characters for Kaladin.
What I like about this one is that it's not just Tien. It's not just like Kaladin is kind of like the surrounded by death all around him.
Yeah.
It's sort of like for him, he's like, oh my god, this is a pattern in my life of like everyone I love dies around me.
Tien was a critical one, but it's like, let's list off all these other characters you don't know that died around me.
Yeah. So
he's just the most significant one, but
I don't find it egregious, you know?
No.
No, yeah.
And then there's In White Sand for Chris. We have a male example in Givelden.
Yeah.
This is another, I think, subversion because she thinks he's dead and then she finds out he isn't. And when they kind of have that conversation, he's just like, I'm not going back. They're going to kill me. I'm going to stay here. You have fun. Bye. Like,
yeah. And this is actually one of the differences between the graphic novel and the prose. Because in the prose, like, he was not a good person. That scene did not go as well as it did in the graphic novel.
That is true.
Because it's like he says like a lot of Chris's idealization of Gavin was that like she didn't exactly fit into society well. Like people made fun of her, but like Gavin was the one that like stuck up for her. And in the prose, it's revealed that like, oh no, he was participating in all of that behind her back, and he was just a garbage human being.
Oof. Oof.
I'm kind of glad that got cut out of the graphic novel.
Brandon wrote White Sand a long time ago.
Yeah.
So that some changes in White Sand were good.
But still, like even in the graphic novel, like he still wasn't a good person.
No,
it just wasn't as anti-Chris.
Yeah, there's a lot of dead parents. There's a lot of those, especially in his YA books.
Yeah, and it's a common tool. Like you see this in YA all over the market because it gives child or younger characters agency, right? It's kind of hard to give a younger character a lot of power or agency if they have a parent protecting them
who are awesome,
telling them what to do.
Who are acting like parents should. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, acting like parents should. Exactly. So like having an absent parent or a kidnapped parent or a dead parent is almost I'd say for like your kind of classic YA, it's almost like a necessary element. You need to get them out of the way
so then the child can
matter. Whether it's because the kid is away at like a boarding school or the kid is going on a Pokemon journey. I don't know. But yeah, you need to get rid of mom and dad for a bit.
Yeah. And it's like, but even in like Warbreaker with Ciri and Vivenna's mother, her death kind of affects how Ciri gets treated.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Because it's like their mother, who isn't named.
Yep.
For whatever reason, died like in a horseback riding accident. And like also reminds them of like Ciri reminds them of her mother. And so like she's restricted in a lot of things because like from a noble sense, it's because like they don't want the same thing to end up to Ciri. But that's kind of used as a horrible excuse because she's not her mother, she's her own human being.
I kind of forgot about that connection because I was like, man, we have like nothing on their mother, other than died in horseback riding accident.
Yeah, we don't have a name or anything for the mother, right?
Oh yeah, there's lots of unnamed mothers and
that's the other thing I think is, again, when you're talking about, okay, maybe this is a common element in YA, but when it's done well versus when it's done bad, and I think looking at the impact on the character and the characterization is important, because sometimes it's obvious that it's just, oh, we need no parents, and that's why we're getting rid of them. And they're not, like, the character is just fine and it doesn't impact them at all, and the deceased parent doesn't get much characterization.
Like Raoden's mom doesn't get that much characterization.
Yeah,
but it's not like Playdov's like a big shadowy element or something.
Yeah, it's like she was the one that, when Raoden broke his leg as a child, like she's the one that convinced Iadon to bring Raoden to the dealing dreams to heal him. But other than that, like she died when he was relatively young, I think.
This is like the dead and absent mother. Like they're not important. They're just gone. Here's like a little tidbit to show that they're nice, and
it gives some weight of history, which does serve a purpose in storytelling.
And so some examples from Brandon's YA stuff.
Oh yeah,
starting with David and the Reckoners. He has two dead parents. One of whom is his father, who we get a lot of detail on. And then his mom.
Do we know anything about his mom?
Know that his mom is dead?
Yes.
I thought she just wasn't mentioned.
At least on the Coppermind, like Blaine Charleston, who is David's father, is described as a widower. So
brilliant.
Yeah, because I wasn't actually sure if she was dead or not either before we started talking and preparing for this podcast.
Yeah, I didn't remember until I checked the Coppermind, and you're like,
widowed when Calamity. Yeah, okay, all right.
Shows you how much detail she gets as a character.
Yeah, seriously.
And comparing that to like the dead spouses, or like even comparing David's father to his mother. Yeah, it kind of feels like Brandon needed one significant death for David, and so it's the dad. But he didn't want to like overcomplicate things by having like two parents and everything, and so just kind of ignored the mom part.
Yeah,
because he had to be an orphan.
Interestingly enough, you also see this in children's television, and that's partially financial because they don't want to pay two adult actors for like minor roles. And you see this in adaptations sometimes, where in a book they'll have two parents, and then in the television version they'll only have one.
Wow, really interesting. Where's Ash Ketchum's dad? We don't know.
Oh, there's a lot of fan theories.
I bet there is.
Giovanni, obviously.
For most of the YA, David and the Reckoners, Spencer in Skyward, and Joel in Rhythmatist is like I noticed you guys have said the unnamed mother a couple times here. All right.
Yep.
But the dad gets to be significant even in death. The mom is there. She doesn't get a name, even if she's alive or dead. And then
we
the
do not have Spencer's mom's name.
And we don't have Joel's name.
Joel. Oh, and she actually has.
She's on screen.
She's on screen. She talks a lot.
And granted,
she has.
I think we would have Spence's mother's name if it wasn't a first person.
Right. That's fair.
That's
fair. Like, I think he still could have worked a name in there. I'm not excusing it.
Yeah.
But I do think he would have written it, I hope, if it wasn't first person. But
yeah, it's kind of like Spencer has her mom, but the mom isn't important. Like she's there. And it's nice that Spencer can go back to her, but she has very limited speaking roles. The important parent is the dad.
Yep.
Who is dead.
But also, like, her grandmother gets a name.
Her grandmother
gets a name.
Yeah.
Her grandmother, and also, like, to counter my own point, her dad, like, her dad could have just been, oh, my dad the whole time.
Instead, it's Zine Nightshade.
He had to have a call sign. So I mean, even if it was just that, it's fine.
Call sign Zine.
What was his call sign?
Chaser.
Chaser. Okay.
Yeah, wow, the unnamed mothers. But like, yeah, Spence's mom is not an important character, whereas the dad is plot important, and the grandma is much more important for reasons. But
I mind it less because she still gets like a significant female family member. You know,
she's not
it's
dead,
sort of like
so
it doesn't
that's good.
have to be the mom, I guess. You know, it just like it's just like weird. Oh, it fits into the pattern in a really weird way, and I'm like, oh, it still happens this way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I think very easily, like, the situation could have been reversed. Like, Spence's mother could have been the sky pilot, airship, spaceship pilot, space
the pilot.
This is the one. That had like the defect, and her father is the one that's living.
Yeah, there's no like societal restraints on the Skyward universe
in that respect.
I feel like
respect,
all the young adult ones, Reckoners, Skyward, Rhythmatist, this was like it's all very gender equal. It was like there's no sense of like only men can do this cool thing.
Yeah, I guess it's true. Yeah. It's just funny how all the dead dads seem to be very plot important in all the stories,
and all the women are just there, and they're like,
yeah. But if you're in the Cosmere and if you're a dead spouse, you're usually female.
Yeah,
it's just an interesting reversal: dead wives and dead fathers.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of wonder how much that's maybe an unconscious bias, or maybe a conscious bias that Brandon is working against. But like he's a male writer, and maybe has a very strong relationship with his father, and so thinks more about a father-son relationship than maybe a mother-son relationship, and is maybe also thinking about the husband. Like I think some of those things,
it's hard to talk about Brandon specifically because like I don't know him.
This is all like
conjecture.
He talks about
like
his mom, but
in a general sense, like in a general sense, like everyone, we all have unconscious biases. So like when I think about this specific trope or this specific issue, like I'm not necessarily thinking about just Brandon and what he's specifically thinking. It's kind of like I'm thinking about just how this is like the easy way, like this is what feels like natural and normal because it's like a trope we see all the time. It's kind of easy to go here without and just like this feels natural, I'll just write it this way, and like it's societal. This is what we see in stories over and over again. I would think like even when I write things in like very low key things, like the tropes that come out just as like this feels natural, this feels like like just automatically I go here is it falls along these lines. It's like there's gonna a dead wife and a dead father, like something like the people who drive us. It's like a man is motivated by like a death of a loved one, and a child is motivated to try to aspire to be like their fathers. So it's sort of like why don't children aspire to be like their mothers? And why aren't women seen as strong enough to survive the death of like a husband and get to be the hero?
And
just this is like very unconscious. Like I don't think anyone is consciously thinking about these questions when they write this trope. But
and I think it's important. I think like where Brandon I think recognized this and did like the counter example was in Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell, where
that's true.
Like he wrote about like a core aspect of Silence's character. Was that she was a mother, right? And middle-aged, and he also wrote it for a dangerous women anthology. So I
probably good for him to stretch that way. So
when I see things like that, I'm like, okay, you're like maybe that slips in now and again, but you are aware of it and you're trying different things and you're bringing kind of diverse characters out.
More female roles. More female villains. We need that too,
absolutely.
Because the ones honestly the female villains he's put in have been my favorites.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
I love Palm.
Palm.
No, she's
Aether.
absent. Shashara and
Aether was fun. She was
Yeah.
a very much alive wife who was very much wish who wasn't, but
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Aesaden, yeah, and Ili.
Eli.
Eli has been
Yep.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Like more
You're
of a-
the director of your own story, everyone.
Yeah.
Audiobook listeners are furiously typing in the comments.
Oh god.
I'm sorry. The audiobooks are so long. I could read it so much faster. Cool. Well, some less good use of tropes, but a lot of, I think pretty good. It's more just amusing in retrospect, I would say. Usually in reading these, I don't mind much. To be honest, Ian, I think probably Tyndall's the one that probably bothers me the most now that you mention it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think Brandon overall interacts with tropes in a very effective and thoughtful manner. Like, he's not perfect, obviously, but all of these were enjoyable characters for me for the most part.
And when you write as much as Brandon, like, patterns are going to
That's
crop up. Like, that's just how humans are.
There's a lot of gods in these books, and people becoming gods. It's like, yes.
Apotheosis. Yeah, but like I said before, it's like I never have a problem with them in the moment when I'm reading it. I go into one specific book and I have a great time. Yeah, it's only in the patterns, having multiple examples to point to and saying this has happened over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
I think I've said everything.
Cool.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, we
did a lot today.
We like to do some character-y podcasts because I know, as you can tell who gets on certain episodes, certain people really feel strongly about world building, and some people, like Shannon, do not care about that and is not on those episodes.
I don't care about it at all. I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. So we want to, if you're the type of person who isn't as much into the world building and more into the characters, we want to do podcasts like this and do character analysis podcasts. There will be more eventually. Try and get a good balance, and hopefully if you do like the more world building aspects, hopefully you still enjoyed this podcast.
Yeah.
But I think
And
it's
also,
interesting to analyze these.
Analyzing, and this one, we have talked a lot about character, but it was also kind of a meta subject, which I think it's interesting to look at some of the meta of.
Yeah.
Tropes are always fun to talk about. We could probably talk about Brandon avalanches and rating those and stuff, a writing thing, and I think that's been on our list for a while. That could be fun.
Have we done arranged marriages yet?
I think we touched on it in the love triangle episode.
In the love triangle,
we've mentioned it, but we never actually delved into the trope across all of his works.
We did have a Brandon tropes episode where we did talk about that. But this we got to do more detail, which is good.
Yeah.
To be honest, I kind of forgot about that episode of Children.
Yeah.
I did too.
Shardcast is like a copper mine. Once we're recording, after I'm done editing it, I do not remember. Someone was commenting on one of the Knights Radiant podcasts, like, can you point me to this one thing? And I'm like, dude, I do not even remember what part of the podcast you're referring to. If you point me to where, I will probably remember what we were talking about, but right now,
as soon as I sign off, I'm like, oh my god, what did we talk about? If someone's
literally no idea.
100% the same.
The second this episode is posted, I'm gonna be like, oh my god, what are they saying? I said, I don't know.
What did we even say? Yeah, seriously, it is like a copper mine.
Never ask us a question in the Discord about something we said. We need you to do a timestamp to the video so we can actually remember what we said.
It's if it's especially funny, I remember it, but it was hey, remember when you said this one really specific thing? Not at all.
And I remember what you guys say way more than myself.
Yeah, that's true.
If someone's oh, when Ian said this, I'll be like, oh yeah, that was good or whatever. But
it's you never remember your own points.
Yeah, what were you talking about? And I'm like, I don't know.
We hope you guys enjoyed this episode. So you know what time it is. It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character?
This character is from Roshar.
Menace. Tien.
Tom.
Raise.
Void in drag on a horse.
It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character? Caw.
All right, listeners, you know what time it is. It is time for Who's That Cosmere Character? It's a game show where you email a character to wtcc at 17thshard.com with 5 clues that character corresponds to. I read each clue aloud on air, and after each one, our panelists have a chance to guess who's that Cosmere character.
You finally guess Grace gets to torture us again because it's been a bit because we skipped it on Ship It or Rip It. So,
all right. This first one was sent in by Andrew.
Hi,
Clue
Andrew.
1. This character carries a weapon.
Shashara.
It is not Shashara.
that would have been great if that was Shashara. That would have been incredible.
Carries a weapon. Vasher.
It is not Vasher.
I'm gonna go with Moash with his Jezrien stabbing knife.
It is not Moash.
That's its official name, actually. The Jezrien stabbing knife.
No, I made the Coppermind article. It's not.
I'll go with my boy Adolin.
It is not Adolin. Clue 2. This character has influenced politics.
Oh, that's not helpful at all. So all the Alethi males who have sharp blades.
Is it Dalinar?
It is not Dalinar.
Is it Sereni?
It is not Sereni.
Is it
That's a good
Gavilar?
It is not Gavilar.
I'm gonna go Mistborn, and I'll say Vin.
It is not Vin.
You know,
Ooh.
she did influence politics. That's true. I was like, doesn't fit what you'd first think of, but you can't argue with results.
Mm-hmm.
Clue 3. This character was part of a failed plot.
Blue Fingers?
It is not Bluefingers.
Is it Sidious?
It is not Sadius.
I'll go with my girl. Is it Shan Alariel?
It is not Sean Alariel.
You like
Is it Yedin, the leader of the Ska Rebellion?
It is not Yedin.
I like how we all have guesses. Like no one is like stalling on these
Yeah, I know.
clues.
Yeah.
Clue 4. This character has done things that go against his or her beliefs.
Go against their.
Is it
beliefs.
Hrathen?
It is not Rathan.
I love how you just someone says something and you just
correct.
pronounce it different your way. I love it.
It's very funny.
That's what you come here for different pronunciations of all your favorite characters.
Has done things that go against their beliefs.
Can I have all the clues again, Grace?
Is it
Carries
Elend?
It is not Elend. Carries a weapon, influenced politics, part of a failed plot, goes against their beliefs.
Oh, I guess he's not part of a failed plot. Never mind.
Has done things that go against their beliefs.
You already guessed Vasher.
I did.
Yeah.
Ugh. This is the one that. Okay, I spoke too soon about stalling.
I mean, I'm stalling too, so.
Yeah. You said Rathan, didn't you? No, Matt said
Matt
Rathan.
did.
Oh,
we already guessed it.
Ian knows
And we already
it.
guessed Adolin as well, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know one that's I think is really obvious, and I haven't been guessing it because it seemed too obvious from the first one, but I'm wondering.
Well,
now
I
if
mean, then you'll be able to guess it next one.
yeah.
I'm not 100% on this one, but there's one clue that isn't quite there, but I think I know.
Okay. I'm just trying to think. I'm like now I'm struggling to come up with someone.
Me too.
I don't want to pass though. I'm like,
No.
this feels like I should know it.
Yeah.
A failed plot. Oof.
Yeah, that's why I went with Blue Fingers, on
Yeah.
that failed plot.
But does Blue Fingers wield a weapon?
I
And
mean,
even with
I don't think so.
I was like thinking maybe like had some implement when killing Blush Reaver or something, but I think he had priest to it. But I don't
The
know.
pen is mightier than the sword, Matt.
Is it Seth?
even Vin, I was
Oh,
kind of
wait,
like,
what did you
Vin
say?
wields
Is
weapons.
it Seth?
Oh, it is Zeth.
Thanks.
Seth?
Yes.
That's
Oh.
what I was thinking from the beginning.
Wow.
And
I
like,
was
oh, no,
actually
that's-
going to go with Rock.
Oh, okay.
That was my guess.
All right, that's a good guess.
Guys,
Wow.
I won
You won.
And-
Is that your first
Clue-
point?
in a long time. Yeah.
Clue 5 was this character wears distinctive clothing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So you
okay.
would have gotten it then.
Yeah.
I think it was partially because we were talking about Nightblood, but as soon as I heard carried a weapon, I was thinking
wait. I was thinking
like Vasher and Seth.
that's what brought me back to Zeth. I'm like, wait a minute.
Shoot.
Zeth carries Nightblood and Oathbringer and da-da-da-da-da. And influenced politics is very
And he
funny.
also
That's true.
carries
Great.
he carries the Honor Blade for the first couple books.
Yeah.
So
Just very funny clue. I love that. Thank you, Andrew.
And with a failed plot, to kill Dalinar. Yeah, it makes sense. Nice.
That was good.
That was good. I like main characters but it's not obvious immediately. But I mean, Matt, I guess you could have guessed it immediately.
yeah, but then I psyched myself out about
Yeah,
it.
I know.
So.
Sometimes you got to go with the low-hanging fruit, but like there was some good misdirects that were like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well,
I
because
guess
you don't
the right
think of
weapon,
Seth as
but-
super political.
Right, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Vin can
Good-
influence
good-
politics. Seth sure does too. Assassins,
Yeah.
very politically
Yeah.
motivated, shockingly.
Vin and Seth would be an interesting shipper rip.
Oh my god. It's like Zane, but more boring.
And more killing,
And
potentially.
more killing.
This next one was sent in by Matt.
Not
Thank
this
you, other Matt.
Clue 1. This character died in battle.
Is it Sen?
Is it who?
Sen? Cenn?
Oh, no.
Okay.
It's not Sun.
Is it Tindwyl?
It is Tindwyl.
I love how you just like, if it's an Arrow 1 character, Matt's just like, I am on it. I got it. Like,
Well,
it's
Also, we specifically
Yeah, we
talked
did.
about
We
Tindwyl
did.
dying
We did.
like this episode. So
yeah.
It was on the mind.
Yeah. It's like if someone
Uh,
got Shashara on that last one on Clue 1,
Yeah.
you'd be like, damn.
Like I guessed.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, I would have been impressed. It would be good.
what were the other clues?
This character was not a warrior. This character was a successful trainer. This character defended a gate against monstrous foes. This character was in love with a eunuch.
Nice.
Progression, like the last clue, you definitely get it.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
gate clue is like slightly less.
Should probably
but
get it, yeah.
Probably, yeah. No, good progression.
But now I just have an image of Tindwyl as a Pokemon trainer. Does anyone else? No? Just me? Okay. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. So, in 2 weeks from now, it will pass 17 Shard's 10th anniversary. And we want to do something special. So, it's going to be a non-standard episode that will be long and will be live on our Twitch channel, which we're going to link below. And we will post the VOD up. I think it will happen Saturday, June 6th. So you won't get an episode on that Friday, but it will air live on Saturday. And then I'll probably need to do some cuts. Then it'll be posted later. But that's what we'll do. And so stay tuned for that. Should be lots of fun. You can come interact with us, ask us questions. We'll probably do a bunch of Who's That Cosmere characters and Q&A. And aside from that, I haven't thought about this that much, but we're going to get the details of that soon. And hopefully it won't be a disaster. So it may be a disaster, but we've been around for 10 years. And Shardcast, nearly 3 years of consistent episodes. So that's pretty good. Because, a bunch of people have been asking for live shows. So, you know what? We're going to do that. Well, probably not all of our shows are going to be live, but,
You wouldn't want all of them to be live.
No, you really
No.
don't. You really don't. You're going to see all the downtime. You're going to see where I make long pauses between words that these guys have to suffer through and I cut out to make myself sound better. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun for everyone. So you can go find us on 17shard.com for all your news, discussion, theories, and fun you could ever want. You can join us in Discord. You can join us in Facebook. Twitter, SoundCloud, YouTube. You can leave us a review on iTunes. You can support us on Patreon. And we'll see you next time live, I guess. Whoa. Assuming it's not a disaster. So, I have about a few weeks to figure out how this works. So it should be okay. So we will see you all next time.
Bye.
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 Caw. Oh, Rip.
Uh-oh.
This is.
We love Discord.
I think I keep doing whatever happens a few minutes after Shannon.
That is weird.
It is weird.
That is true.
Discord doesn't like me streaming for whatever reason. Like whenever I'm streaming video games, it always stops and does the exact same thing. It kicks me out of Discord for a second and brings me back, and then
Discord doesn't like that we're criticizing gender dynamics, so it's kicking out the female casters.
Discord is sexist. Discord is so sexist.